Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has highlighted revelations that U.S. President Donald Trump planned to invade and annex Venezuela. Mexico, India, Ireland, and Norway were elected to the United Nations Security Council. Voting will be continued on Thursday to fill one more vacant seat. In Tunisia, hundreds of unemployed citizens took the streets claiming for the establishment of legal rules that guarantee jobs. Hello, today is Thursday, June 18, from the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the South. I'm Ernesto Dominguez. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro stressed that according to a book to be published by former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, President Trump was considering an intervention in Venezuela.
According to the memoirs, with no non-publication date, Trump stated that invading Venezuela would be cool. Invading Venezuela would be a cool thing. Soldiers, police, workers, listen to this. Invading Venezuela would be a cool thing. Donald Trump still believes that. He also wrote that the president said that Venezuela was already part of the United States. In other words, that we are not Venezuelan, we are gringos. There it is. The truth is being revealed. The truth is coming out about what we have been dealing with and what we have defeated during these years, 2019 and 2020, and we will continue to defeat.
And President Maduro also noted that according to the revelations, President Trump intended to invade Venezuela in order to annex its territory.
Trump intended to invade Venezuela in order to convert it into United States territory. This is the breaking news today because of the release of the book by John Bolton, who is an American diplomat and ex-advisor to President Donald Trump. Bolton revealed that President Trump considered Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaidó as weak and childish in comparison with President Maduro.
And the Venezuelan president also offered an update on COVID-19 figures this Wednesday, noting it was the most bitter day of the epidemic in the country. President Maduro reported 159 new locally transmitted COVID-19 cases, of which 132 occurred at Las Pulgas market in the city of Maracaibo. Meanwhile, 72 cases were imported, of which 56 were nationals returning from Colombia and 16 from Brazil. The Venezuelan president stressed that new special measures are under consideration and will be announced to protect the Venezuelan population as new cases entering the country irregularly from Colombia and Brazil pose a threat to major Venezuelan cities. In Brazil, one of the most iconic defenders of the Amazon rainforest has died after contracting the coronavirus. 65 years old indigenous chief Paulinho Payacan died of COVID-19 on Tuesday in a hospital in the city of Redenção. The environmental leader had accused the government of Jair Bolsonaro of neglecting indigenous communities. Payacan gained world fame on leading the fight against the construction of a hydroelectric power plant in Belo Monte in the 1980s. He also worked to build alliances around the world to save the Amazon.
Paulino Payacan is an authentic leader, a traditional leader who also knew politics. He's a victim of coronavirus, of COVID-19, and today leaves us with great memories, learning, and much nostalgia.
Panama has rolled out rabid coronavirus tests following a recent jump in daily cases. The rabid tests were purchased in Europe and China and have been tested and verified by the Gorgas Memorial Institute, the country's leading medical research center, with results available within 48 hours. Meanwhile, health workers have visited homes in the populous community of Nuevo Tocumen, one of the most affected areas in the country, where they targeted families who have reported one of their members being sick, as well as those who have presented symptoms. or have had contact with positive cases. Panama has registered over 21,000 confirmed cases and more than 400 COVID-19 fatalities.
The intention is to continue to do mass testing more and more. For example, in the last reports, there were 3 consecutive days of 600 cases or more. There was also a report of 800 cases. That is the reflection that we are doing more the tests. If they continue to abuse flexibilization, probably the third block, sectors that are reopening after lockdown measures, won't open, and even the risk of closing previous block is there. We might also close the second or even the first. Therefore, we need the population to continue collaborating and taking care of themselves so that we can do the job properly.
Mexico has reported a surge in COVID-19 figures surpassing 19,000 deaths. According to the health minister, to date, the Latin American country has recorded 159,793 confirmed cases and 19,080 fatalities. So far, Mexico City and Mexico State are the 2 regions worst affected. Meanwhile, the government has made a call to the population to respect social distancing and lockdown measures which remain imposed. In Peru, a group of health workers protested to demand proper protection equipment against COVID-19. The workers gathered in front of Edgardo Gabriel de Martins National Hospital in the city of Lima to denounce that they do require a special biosecurity team to care for patients infected with the virus. COVID-19 figures in Peru now exceeded 240,000 cases. The protests also demanded that authorities grant a bonus of $205 per month to all medical personnel working in critical areas.
We represent 12,000 nurses from Social Security who are in the first lines of battle. After more than 90 days of quarantine, we are asking for personal protective equipment.
Today we have surpassed 7,000 dead due to this pandemic. We are at nearly 240,000 patients, and it's the 94th day of the quarantine that has been badly handled, without any social support.
Canadian gold mining company Govt halted operations at the Roosevelt gold mine in Suriname as union reps issued a stop work order after 7 employees tested positive for the novel coronavirus. The company said the infected employees were quarantined and it was taking steps to disinfect workers' living and work areas, but the trade union used one of its preventive measures as the basis to stop work. Govt said it had implemented social distancing rules, sanitary measures, and reduced its on-site staff at mine after the outbreak. The Roosevelt gold mine is majority owned by the Canadian company, while the government of Suriname holds a 5% stake. And more stories coming up after these very short breaks, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Mexico, India, Ireland, and Norway were elected to the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday, but the 193 UN member states must return on Thursday to continue voting to fill one more vacant seat after there was no clear winner. Canada lost out to Ireland and Norway in a hotly contested election. Mexico and India were elected unopposed. Kenya and Djibouti were competing for the final seat, but there was no clear winner. To ensure geographical representation, seats are allocated to regional groups. But even if candidates are running unopposed in their group, they still need to win the support of more than 2/3 of the UN General Assembly. The new members will start their 2-year term on the 15 members council on January 1st, 2020. UN member states also elected Turkish diplomat and politician Volkan Voksir as the president of 75th session of the UN General Assembly.
Having obtained the required 2/3 majority of members present and voting and the greatest number of votes, India, Ireland, Mexico, and Norway are elected members of the Security Council for a 2-year term beginning on 1 January 2021. I congratulate the states that have been elected members of the Security Council.
The German government is urging other EU states to prepare for a no-deal Brexit, according to an internal document that casts doubts on Britain's optimism over changes of an early agreement on its future ties with the bloc. Britain left the European Union on January 31st, and their relationship is governed by a transition arrangement that keeps previous rules in place while new terms are negotiated. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who confirmed last week that Britain has no intentions of extending that transition beyond 2020, wants to strike a free trade deal quickly. U.S. President Donald Trump has sued his former National Security Advisor John Bolton in an attempt to block the publications of his memoirs, which he claimed are filed with classified information. The book addresses an array of topics such as chaos in the White House, the president's inconsistency, his haphazard decision-making process, and his dealing with allies and enemies alike. Bolton's lawyer says the White House is using national security justifications as an excuse to stop him from talking, which could lead to criminal charges.
To the Attorney General before, I will consider every conversation with me as president highly classified.
Mexico, Canada, and the United States announced they will maintain restrictions on movements at their borders. The measures extends the ban on crossing from one country to another through July 21st. The U.S.-Mexico border is one of the most active in the world, as over 1 million people normally cross it every day. Officials announced on Tuesday that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada decided to extend the restrictions on non-essential travel across the borders for 30 days. In Belgium, dozens of freelancer interpreters working in EU institutions have demonstrated in front of the European Parliament over the lack of financial assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic. Protesters say after virus lockdowns were implemented, their work has all but dried up. And now, with the usual summer break around the corner, many will go without 5 months of income this year. Interpreters say they feel abandoned by the EU and are angered by the lack of financial aid, while the body continues to preach solidarity. Around 1,200 freelance interpreters usually ensure simultaneous interpretations across the EU's 24 languages during conferences and events. The International Association of Conference Interpreters is negotiating with EU agencies to do better than they offer of an advance to be paid back when normal interpreting work resumes.
Solidarity, they've asked the member states to do it, they've set up a fund, but they're not practicing that solidarity that they're preaching within the institutions themselves, and that's quite problematic. And I think that a solution can be found, but for that they need to engage in proper social dialogue, they need to engage with our interpreters.
Mid-June, July's around the corner. We don't work in August anyway. That will take us through to September, and at that point that will be roughly 5 months that some of us will have had no income and all of us will have suffered from a marked drop in our income. So our patience essentially is beginning to run out, and that's why we've decided to up the game.
And we're taking one last very short break, so stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. In Tunisia, hundreds of unemployed citizens marched across the country claiming for the establishment of legal rules that guarantee jobs. The demonstrations concentrated on Bardo Square outside Parliament, while some tried to overcome police barriers. However, attempts to reach Parliament's gates were thwarted by police. Several protesters were arrested but later released as demonstrators accused security officials of harassment. Unemployment had also sparked uprisings across the country and was the reason for ousting longtime President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali in 2018.
The Prime Minister announced that it's suspended until the 2023. I want to tell him, allies, you have no right to freeze the assignment because we have not recently graduated. We have been unemployed for 10 years. The youngest among us is 35. I want to know when will be assigned.
We want our members of parliament to come to the House of Representatives to attend the discussion so that the decisions are not tampered with or so that they do not contain any loopholes, but they refuse. We are not here to vandalize or anything. Look at the large number of security forces. The Ministry of Interior knows very well the number of people attending today, but the Ministry of Employment says it does not know how many of us are employed. Our protest today is peaceful and they know our numbers.
Delegation from Turkey, led by Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, arrived in Libya's capital, Tripoli, to hold talks with the UN-backed government of national accord. During the talks, the authorities reviewed the current situation of the forces supported by Ankara, as thanks to their support, they succeeded in reversing the military siege led by Khalifa Haftar and the Libyan National Army. The two sides also reviewed the international efforts to resolve the crisis gripping the North African nations, while also developing joint plans to bring peace to the nation. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Wednesday announced a further easing of restrictions despite a sharp increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. Ramaphosa said more sectors of the economy will be allowed to reopen as long as they observe health guidelines. Restaurants with limited capacity, personal care services including hairdressers, conference center holding businesses-related gatherings, cinemas, theaters, and casinos, and non-contact sports will be allowed to resume their activities. South Africa has reported over 80,000 COVID-19 cases, while the death toll stands at over 1,600.
Of certain religious activities. The coronavirus.
And the South African president also has called for drastic actions on violence against women, which has surged during the current COVID-19 lockdown. During Wednesday's COVID-19 update, President Ramaphosa stressed concerns regarding the rising gender-based violence. During the lockdowns imposed across the world due to the coronavirus pandemic, domestic violence has been on the rise and protests have erupted in South Africa. However, the president has appealed for calm and called on citizens to work with the government to combat violence against women and children so that the country doesn't end up fighting two wars alongside the pandemic.
We will speak for the 89-year-old grandmother who was killed in an old age home.
African leaders thanked China for its solidarity and support to combat the coronavirus pandemic this Wednesday during an extraordinary China-Africa summit chaired by the Chinese president.
The strength of the bond between Africa and China is clear. The solidarity we have seen during this difficult time has once again demonstrated the productivity of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, whose 20th anniversary we will mark later this year. The government of the People's Republic of China and the Chinese private sector provided crucial supplies of testing materials and medical equipment in Africa when it was needed most.
Sino-Africa solidarity and better multilateral cooperation is key to winning the battle against this pandemic. Through this and other platforms, let us continue to strengthen the bonds of solidarity, of cooperation and collaboration that exist amongst us, and take collective action to ensure the future of humanity.
On the World Day to combat desertification and drought, the Chinese Forestry and Grassland Administration noted that the country has made great strides in the prevention and control of desertification. With up to 8.8 million hectares of its desertified areas having been turned into green land since 2016, China has completed 88% of the target of rehabilitating 10 million hectares of such land. The country's fight against this phenomenon has advanced together with its efforts to reduce poverty, with the development of eco-friendly industries in accordance with the conditions of sandy and desertified areas. And following the grievances expressed by health practitioners on their salary review, the Zimbabwean government has increased salaries for all civil servants, as well as pensions, as earnings have been eroded by inflation. The Ministry of Finance on Wednesday announced that civil servants' salaries and pensioners' allowances will be adjusted upwards by 50% with immediate effect. Meanwhile, some allowances, especially for health workers in COVID-19 response, will be paid in US dollars to curb the spiraling inflation in the country. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Ernesto Dominguez. Thank you for watching.